All right, so making another video tonight. Um, Pretty much just showing how I entered these trades, like what I was looking at, what I was doing. And I feel like this is one of the things that is the hardest to do when people are essentially trying to learn or even experienced traders. I mean, I have a hard time with it too because you have to be confident in your moves, but that means that you have to essentially, make the trades on like a pump like this in order to not just feel like you're FOMOing. You have to make them fast and pretty much fast enough that you're not thinking about it. And so this might be a long-winded video. I'm really not sure. I'm hoping that it comes off clear enough. So let's just go for it. All right. So what I am trying to get across is when I entered trades here, what I was looking at, essentially what my thought process was from essentially, I would say probably here on is where I'll go. What my thought process was between this time. Wrong one. Which is, about a week. Well, let's call it a week. So what my thought process was for one whole week of Bitcoin. All right. So the first thing I want to look at is Bitcoin CME, and so basically my thoughts were that we had a bunch of charts going in the group between Bitcoin, USDT, Ethereum, Total 2, DXY, ES1, and those are all like the major market movers that I will frequently chart and make my moves off of. And that's exactly what this was. It ends up being difficult to keep the group updated with my thoughts on that because essentially my strategy using them changes based on real-time data. And that's often what I tell people, and it makes it sound like you don't know what you're doing. And I try to keep all that stuff out of the group and just post the charts I'm looking at, because then people can look at them and go, okay, this is what I'm watching. Let me watch the same thing. But if I'm in there saying, oh, I'm waiting for this breakout and then I'm entering, well, when that breakout comes, I might have added new criteria that's making it so that I'm not entering. You know what I mean? And I don't like to be caught on the other end of that. People basically saying, "Oh, you were waiting on that thing," and that's exactly what this scenario was. And so let me walk through it. So essentially, I was charting this triangle, the larger gray one, on CME because CME is just a much cleaner chart. And truthfully, if you're trading CME, like if you're willing to wait for candle closes and things, you just get much better signals. And so I had this ascending triangle drawn on CME as well as on Bitcoin right here. And so really what ended up happening, actually, I was watching this for longer than a week. It was two, because it was this candle right here. Yeah, so I was watching this for a good week and a half. And so essentially what happened is on smaller time frames, we're going to look at this wick that's right here. Smaller time frames, we were looking at this wick. Obviously, I have the ascending triangle. That's what this orange line is. Drawn different on this chart. It's because it's a 4-hour, not a 12-hour or a daily. So essentially watching this big drop. And so if we zoom in on that even more, I saw this big drop down here. And so what I did way back in here is as soon as this dropped below, when this one candle, let's see, when this one candle right here just ate it up, I entered on that pump. So I entered longs here. I said, okay, this is a fake out. Chances are we're driving to the top of this, yellow bear flag I had at the time. And so I said, all right, let me enter along here. And if I see a fake out, I will enter like that. And I want to say, even if I don't have an end game plan, like where it's going, because essentially I can enter and then go, okay, let me make sure that was the right move. Because chances are things aren't going to go so crazy so quickly that, if this dumps back down, I can go, okay, let me get back out. I made a bad decision. And so I entered on that, and it's climbing, and I go, okay, that was a bear trap. We're good for some time. We should be in good shape. And it did the normal bear trap thing where it climbs, and then it didn't. And so when it didn't, I was actually still holding it because I'm saying, okay, this is going to come back and it's going to retest here, and we're going to put in a higher high. That did not happen. So we obviously got this lower high on this one. And so I actually ended up exiting pretty much in here. Let me use a totally different color. Purple too hard to see. Let's go light blue. There's no light blue in here yet. So I pretty much exited in here because I was like, okay, this is, this was a rising wedge on small time frames or a rising channel, and it broke lower. And I said, all right, I don't like this. This is a bear trap. It didn't put in the higher high. I'm just not comfortable. And so basically, if I entered down here, I said, you know what? I held positions for a while hoping for this. I say a while. It was a couple days. It was a weekend essentially. But I locked in, mediocre gains. I didn't take a loss on that, which is the big part. I said, okay, let me just reevaluate what the heck is going on here, because essentially that bear trap did not play fast enough. It didn't play out fast enough for me to feel like it was invalidating this, because at this point we had basically, entered here, it ran up, it did this double tap, and at this point it was hitting this resistance, and I was like, oh no, that's not good. And it got rejected off of that. And I said, I don't like that. I hate everything about this. Let me close out with a couple percent, and I will wait for this to play out. And so that took care of this whole bear trap idea. At that point, I was done with that and said, let me reevaluate what's going on. I added this trend line at that point. And so some of the big things that I was watching, and we're just going to go through each of the charts that we were looking at. One, we were looking at, okay, so actually, yeah. With me charting that line, I also said, let me go to CME. And that's when I ended up finding this, wedge that was in here, this orange wedge. I said, okay, this is a little bit cleaner. Again, it's not perfect, but it is a different picture, is basically what I was going off of. So like, okay, if this breaks higher and this different pattern on CME breaks higher, okay, there's two ideas that co-align with each other. Conversely, if this bear flag breaks lower, this yellow flag, actually, I don't really want to call it a bear flag because this is kind of scammy. If this channel breaks lower and this orange wedge breaks lower, that's two totally different ideas also validating each other. And so that was the first thing that I was thinking. And I said, okay, we're also running out of time on this wedge, so we obviously have a time limit here. All right. Bitcoin dominance. We were charting this wedge. I wasn't trading off of this by any means. But this is, again, another timer, another way to see, if we're at resistance or support in that case. Ethereum had a couple patterns, and I do chart Ethereum because it does help with some of the altcoins. Depending on, you can essentially use Bitcoin dominance and an Ethereum chart to kind of tell what altcoins are going to do for the most part. And so at the same time as Bitcoin making this white trend line here, Ethereum was doing the same thing. And so it was basically, okay, whatever one does, the other is going to do. No big deal, that's fine. I don't really have to look at each of them individually, although I will. That's fine. The two big ones. I do want to flip through ES1, not necessarily to say that I really cared about it. I was not actually using ES1 for any kind of like pattern information. I was actually just putting alerts on ES1, essentially seeing if it was tanking. And so much how I have an alert here, essentially we were in this time frame at this point where this is, big dump, big spike, big dump, big spike. And so essentially, like, when this dump comes down here, I'm essentially putting an alert right down here. So I know if this is breaking into new low territory, I just want to know about it. I wasn't trading off it, but if this is tanking, I'm just not entering. That was basically the strategy on that. And so let's look at Total 2. Total 2 had this larger wedge. And during all of this uncertain time, we were actually in this area right here, which conveniently enough is pseudo breakout, not breakout area. And so not totally usable information on the actual blue wedge, but what I was 100% using on Total 2 was this support line. Touch here, touch here, touch here, kind of fakeish trap there. But this is a line that was getting a bunch of action. And so I was like, all right, this is at least a level of some strength. And so I was using that support line there. And I was also using this bottom one because I did not want a lower low to be put in. I did not want this to keep printing down because that would just be a sign of rollover. USDT, I had this wedge drawn, or this channel drawn for a long time, but during the area that we were talking about a lot of this stuff, that was up in here. And so not really close to the top or the bottom. So I wasn't waiting it, but I did have it charted. I was keeping an eye on it because it's important. And undoubtedly the largest one that I was watching, and sorry about all the noise on this chart, just try to ignore a lot of it for this concept. The blue channel is what I was watching. It was essentially that if this breaks lower, that is just an idea for midterm holds. It's an idea that not a midterm hold necessarily for like weeks or months, but it's a sign that for the at least near future, things are safe-ish at least. And so to go back through the main ideas, the biggest things I was watching at this point, this blue wedge I would put at number 1 on the DXY. This blue channel was the number 1, because if the area that we were in when we were, kind of when I was unsure, just sort of waiting, was right in here. And so we're creeping into support. And so it was either bounce time or dump time. So that blue trend line is certainly what was at the top of my list. And again, as this data evolved, the priorities can shift around. And that's why it's really hard for me to share these ideas. And I just try to share the charts so that people can try to keep updated on their own, essentially. And so this blue wedge, number 1. This white trend line, number 2. Ethereum trend line, number 3. And the CME orange flag. And so essentially the order of operations that things went in. And again, I exited, let me go back here. I exited this long that I entered back here, somewhere right around here. And so this ended up actually pushing higher here. Actually, I think I might have this drawn a little bit different than it was. Yeah. No, I have this drawn differently than it was at the time. This line was actually up here, I think, and this was down here. Yes, this is exactly how it was. Sorry about that. So this is how it was drawn. So I exited back in here. This actually broke out. It broke out and came back, and I did not enter back in. I was still not in it here. Okay, that's very important to note because I did wait. I said I'm not certain yet. This is exactly, and I think I posted in the group at this point. It's like, this is perfect criteria for a fake out and 20% Bitcoin down. Like, this is textbook where it would happen if it was going to happen. And so at this point, we're sitting in this area. Bitcoin is broken out. I said, okay, that's one checkbox that I had. Got it. Done. CME at that point was also in this area. Okay, CME has broken out. Good. Perfect. Got it. That's check mark number 2. Total 2 at that point, I think, was kind of down in here. I was like, or no, it was, yeah, no, it would have been in here. I was like, I don't like that. I would love to see this regained. So I was still kind of like, all right, I don't really trust it. Wasn't waiting it a whole lot. ES1 doing whatever it was, didn't care. And the bigger one, DXY. So when Bitcoin was in this zone here, DXY was here. And I did not like that because, again, I said that this is perfect criteria for a fake out. And if a fake out was going to happen, this DXY was going to come down here, tap this, and just rip higher. And so I was like, I don't like it. I was essentially what I was telling myself was that if, and this is quite literally like kind of what was going through, and I think I actually posted this in a couple different chats. If Bitcoin is to, let's go to a big one. If it is genuinely to break out higher from this, the upside is going to be large enough that I'm willing to miss some of this. But if this was going to fake out, the drop was going to be significant and fast enough. I don't want to be a part of it. And that was essentially what I was doing, is I was saying, let me wait until this either, immediately fakes or not. And so again, as soon as this is coming up here, what I'm doing is I'm taking an alert and I'm dropping an alert right down here. I want to see it fall back under this trend line, and I'm going to put another one right here. And if we would have lost this trend line, I would not have entered a short. If we would have lost this support, I probably would have jumped in a short. And so it's a constantly, I don't want to say if then, because it's not necessarily an if then, but it's, you know, constantly just check boxes. You know, you have to figure out the criteria that you're comfortable with. And based on what I mentioned, that, you know, if this is going to be a move up, it's going to be a big move up. And if it's going to be a move down, it's going to be a big, fast move down. I was willing to just say either move is going to be big enough. I don't want to gamble it because it didn't make sense. And so what I was waiting for is I said, okay, the only thing that could really add the icing to the cake and make this confirmed is, one, DXY doesn't fake out much. It's, you know, the dollar index. It's freaking huge. If it does fake out, it does something like this, where, you know, you can imagine that this zoomed in as one line here, and it went up, and then creeped back under it, and then dumped again. And so it's not scammy like Bitcoin is, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so what I did is, while the DXY was going, again, I had freaking alerts on everything, and I don't over alert, but it's essentially that, you know, if this dumped down here, I had an alert up here. You know, if this is going to start putting in a new high and breaking this rounded top, I want to know about it. And I also had one on this trend line, which I still do. You can see it down here. Didn't go away yet. I had one on that, and I also had one right about here. And so I want to know if it touched the trend line and bounced, which it did on this wick right here. Touched it and bounced. But if it touched it and fell through, I would have gotten 2 alerts. And so realistically, what actually happened is I already knew where Bitcoin was. It was here. I already knew where Total 2 and Ethereum were. They were already broken out here, and they were looking bullish. I was just skeptical because they were looking scammy. And so as soon as this alert went off on this trend line, I immediately got the second one because DXY started to fall pretty quickly. As soon as I got those, I entered every single one of my longs. I entered every single long that I shared with you guys in the Discord, all at the same time. I said, okay, this is it. Now I'm comfortable with it. If it's a fake out, I will be ready for it. And so that's exactly what I did. As soon as DXY started to go, this started to go. And I think that I entered, like, because of the timing and the way that it worked out, I think that I entered right about here. And the same is true for Ethereum. I think that my Ethereum long, and I can actually probably check this. Let me actually confirm this. I'll give an exact time frame. My Ethereum price I entered at 1577. Or not 1577, that's the current price. Duh. 1374 is where I opened that. And so my Ethereum I would have opened right here. Which is it, one, breaking past the resistance that we had before, and DXY dumping. Jumped right in it, and then things took off, just kept climbing. And so that's the confirmation that I waited for. That, and really all I gave away doing that was this little amount of, you know, this risk that was here. That's not worth it. But the important part is that, like, the criteria for saying, okay, you know, Bitcoin broke out, CME broke out, but then saying, you know, I don't trust the DXY yet. This is not a too good to be true trading scenario for me yet. And waiting for that. But the second that came, I mean, within a couple minutes, I opened up all of my trades on like 5 different exchanges. And that was just it. Like, okay, we're in. And you have to be that quick with it, because within just, 2 hours, you know, a 3x is up 20%. And so you have to be certain of those moves and lay out that criteria, because figuring it out live is just not going to play out all the time. You're just not going to catch it. Again, this is a very long-winded video again, but hopefully that at least somewhat clarifies. I know I probably didn't give any actual like rationale for any of it, but those are really kind of the level of things to be watching for. And so every time I do share one of these charts, or share, you know, one of these total things, or, you know, any market mover sort of thing, I'm not really just showing, I don't want to say I'm just showing it for my health, because that sounds like a, you know, stupid teacher thing to say. But I can't always say hey, here's what I'm doing, because it evolves as data comes in. It really is up to people just getting more confident with it to make those moves. And the ability to wait and say, hey, this broke out and I'm just going to wait on it, that is 100% just getting comfortable with trading. That is something nobody has when they first start. You can't do that. If you do that, then you're probably doing something wrong, realistically, because you're too comfortable. But start combining those ideas, and it works. Have your checklist already ready and go, okay, did it. I'm waiting on this until I actually make a move. And if you stick to those things, one, what will happen is you actually end up trading less. I can tell you that my success has gone wildly up when I trade less. Scalps I do okay, but trying to do that with like a full portfolio is terrible. This kind of trading is where I get the largest amount of portfolio change. But I don't know. Hopefully that helps.